Hey, Kate. This week we are talking about something a bit fun. We're going to talk
Yeah.
about a classic churn panic moment. And so here's the scenario, right? So you spot an account that looks kind of off. It's not doing great, but they've been paying you for a while. And so the question is, do you poke the bear?
I had this exact conversation with a whole group of Atlassian marketplace vendors over lunch. And there was all these different views because that's the way it is. But in short answer, I would say no. Longer answer, I would say yes, but probably not yet. Because the reality is, if they're already stressed or overloaded or wasn't thinking about your app, it could potentially backfire fast.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think this is one of my favorite questions that we get is, and just a real quick aside here. So anecdotally, I was talking to a friend who joined a new company and new leadership, new team, all sorts of stuff sort of came in to resurrect this company. And one of the first things they did was went and looked for these sort of sleeping bear accounts, right? And the first play was, all right, we're going to contact all of them. And then what happened was they started contacting all of them. They all woke up and got grumpy and canceled their plans. So I
Really?
think it's a, yeah, yeah. And so project immediately got put on hold. All right, well then we're just going to shut up and sort of tiptoe back out of the cave, so to speak, right? Keeping with the bear analogy. So I think this is kind of a fun one to talk about. And I think it's understandable to want to go to people, right? There's this sort of like this ethical quandary, right? They're paying us. Are they getting value? Yes or no? Should we make them aware of that? I don't know that there's a right answer to this, right? So if you see someone whose account is starting to slip off or maybe has been quiet for a while, I feel like I need to go and sort of like smack that red button and raise the alarm with them and say, "Hey, come back in. Let's go." But maybe
Yeah.
that isn't the best move all the time.
But let's just think about that in pros and cons. So, if you think about the pros of doing that, you're looking proactive, you're surfacing an issue before it gets worse. Um, you maybe can course correct in time for renewal. So, that's kind of the pros. But probably the cons, and I'm probably leaning in more to that, is you risk them asking the question, Peter, why are we paying for this? And your admin may have absolutely no idea that this is happening. So you've now forcing them, he or she, to make a decision. When you think about
Yeah.
it, you know, Jira admins and JAs, they just don't have time for deep reviews. So you might accidentally accelerate churn. They might say, okay, I'll just turn this off and let's see who screams. But you might want to you might shut down some quiet discovery that you could be doing in the background if you pull the trigger too fast. So that's kind of the way I see it.
When you say doing discovery in the background, do you mean reaching out to, say, we talk about power users a lot, reaching out to the power users or trying to get in touch with them and seeing what's happening? Could you explain
Yeah,
that a
it's
bit
a
more?
little bit like a surgeon, or you don't exactly start cutting until you've actually done some investigations and done your diagnosis. So I would say it's probably the same sort of scenario. That's the way I've been thinking about it.
Okay, so some diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the quiet
I guess
diagnosis, it's the reading the signals, Pete.
so. We're blending a lot of analogies today. So you have a sick patient. Your bear is sick. Um, so so if you find an account like that, as you said, right? Like so, you're starting quietly. What are those signals that you're looking for? And so we mentioned power user before. Are you looking for anything in particular in their use, in the account use? Like, how do you build that picture before you start doing that? As you said, like discovery.
Well, I'm going to be so boring, it's not funny. And I'm going to say, people, you need your product usage data. If you don't understand, if you do not have any product usage, you are flying blind. You could probably look at a few support tickets and look at sentiment, but I'm like going, maybe not.
Hmm.
So I'd be doing things like looking at the account level. Is the usage dropping off? Is that a signal? I'd be looking at my depth and breadth of my users. Have I got power users that are dropping off, as you talked about? I'd be thinking about, have they stopped using certain features that they'd previously relied on? So these all start to send the signals. And if you kind of understand that context, you've built your picture. So from there,
Yeah.
you've got your clues, and now you move into, okay, so what are we going to do in terms of the engagement?
And I mean, well, mention one of the things that I think has become one of a favorite of ours is you do have options, right? I think that's the important thing to establish here is that especially talking to the Atlassian marketplace space, right? The I can't see names. How do I do anything with this anyway? Sort of approach or frame of mind, which I've fallen into plenty of times in the past. But I learned from you that you can still go back to your support tickets, see which companies have been in touch, have these particular users been in touch in a community that's as vibrant as Atlassian's too. The community channels are great. There's Slack communities. There's the Atlassian community. There are a lot of opportunities to go and engage with people, and I have found that our vocal customers were also vocal in other places, and so maybe they weren't necessarily responding to our emails or in-app messaging, but you can find them. LinkedIn, there are ways to go out and get in touch with these people without being over the top about it, I think.
That's right. I mean, in my mind, it's actually just building that context quietly, and from there, you've kind of got your next steps, I reckon.
Yeah, yeah. And what you're kind of looking to do is just sort of start that conversation, get them back in, maybe get a bit of clarity on your side as a product owner, what is happening, why. And this is something too, is that like the broader context is always important to try to understand that. What's happening in the market. Has Atlassian released something that has made teams scramble, and then they're not focusing on your product right now because they're busy putting out fires elsewhere in the business? So there are ways of going about building an understanding around what your customers are doing or why they're not doing things, without necessarily sort of putting up that red flag or waving that red flag in front of wave red flags in front of bears. Anyway, you know what I mean?
I
You're
do.
not alerting them to something that they shouldn't be necessarily.
So I suppose it does beg the question of when you do actually poke the bear, Pete. And I'd probably be saying it's probably when your usage is still tanking. You've been trying lots of things. For example, talking to power users, as you previously talked about.
Mm.
So for me, it would be how you would be managing that. And you do this quite nicely. So what are some of the things you'd be saying? I'm assuming it's not saying something like your numbers are bad. What would you do in this scenario?
Well, I think if we go back to that sort of, it's putting on that discovery mind or getting into that discovery mindset and trying to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and bringing ideas, right? And I think for a product like ours, right, talking about a coil, it's like, here are the signals that you can get. Here's what you can do with it. Are you running into these circumstances, these situations with your customers, and just trying to uncover where that value is coming from in the first place and bring them back to that. And I think that's just kind of like being a good partner.
That's right.
Here's how
Things like,
we can help.
that's right. Here's what we can help with. Here's what we can do next. It doesn't require minimal lift. And I
Mm.
know to me that, treating yourself as a partner, not as a panic merchant. I think that's probably, don't panic, just as a partner. I'm coming with constructive solutions, which we're happy to do a lot of the lifting. So it then does beg the question, doesn't it? Why JAs often don't want to be. So, the reality is they don't want to actually think, I have to now do a full app review. If this is happening, potentially we're wasting our money. So I need to do something about it. So even
Mm.
if usage is dropped, because it's not on their radar, it it does force something. And remember, I've talked to a lot of JAs, and I say, well, how do you do your apps? And they go, oh, we just turn them off and see if anyone screams.
Yeah, that is the reality, and
It
it's the
is,
easiest way, I think,
but
unfortunately.
also on your product usage, it would show up right away, wouldn't it? You would literally
Yeah.
get the signal that
Yeah.
they've done this.
Mm.
So then it would be working with anyone you do have contact with, saying, this is not working. Do you want to talk to your JA?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Oh,
I think, yeah, I think too, if you're doing your homework, and I think maybe I'm making this sound like it's a lot of work, and
no.
in some cases, I suppose it could be, but if you start getting into, this is something I like to think about it this way, where you've got your priorities, right? Where look at the account that we're talking about. Is it a big bear or is it a tiny little baby bear? And by that I mean, are they paying you a lot of money or not, right? And is it worth spending the time to build that business case to go out and present that to the JA before they go and flick that switch and see who screams, sort of thing. So you've got a business case built with that discovery. And I don't know, from experience, one that'll reopen an old support ticket, send a message, and often that has actually done the trick before. So it doesn't have to be like a months long slog to go build these business cases.
No, and I tend to prioritize because it's usually the 80-20 rule, isn't it? You get 20% of your customer base provides 80% of your revenue.
That's the truth.
Tried and true metrics.
Yeah.
So I tend to focus on the big bears, as you would say, Pete.
Yeah. So I think wrapping up, we really haven't given an answer, have we? Do you poke the bear? Yes or no? I think depends on, it's the worst answer to every question is, well, it depends, right? But I think if you start by prioritizing those companies, like we all have only, X amount of hours in the day, prioritize based on business impact. Is losing this customer really going to hurt? Then I would say, put them at the top of the list, go build your business case. Worst case, if you do poke a bear that gets mad and unsubscribes, you've done the right thing and they were going to go anyway. So I don't see that as a bad.
I'm probably of the mindset of, yes, you do poke the bear, but you poke the bear on your own terms. So I'm probably more concrete about it. So
Okay.
I'm probably concrete. You go when you're prepared. If I'm out hiking, I've got a bell and I've got everything. No, now I'm really digressing really badly. So I would say, and the reality is, if they churn, and you learn from it. And how the hell do you stop it from next time?
Yeah.
For me, that's the crux of it. Is yes, talk with them, but make sure you've done your homework first. In a nutshell.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember too that this is not a one-way door, right? They can always come back. So, learn those lessons. What caused them to start dropping off in the first place? If you are doing all that homework, it can be helpful to sell them again in the future because they were solving something with your product once.
Yeah.
Odds are you can do it again. So to forget them and just write it off.
And the reality is, just get yourself a tool that gives you some signals. You need product usage data. You actually need to see what people are doing. And that's in a nutshell. And you look and you diagnose, and that's when you go in. So you help before you escalate.
I think that's a good way to wrap it up here. Yeah, I think you're right. So bottom line is no bear poking until you've tried the whisper.